The day was unusually hot even for the desert. The sun burned down with a strength that made the sand shimmer as though it were alive, dancing with waves of heat. A lone traveler walked slowly, his feet sinking slightly into the soft golden sand. He had been walking for hours without shade, and every step felt heavier than the last. His lips were dry and his throat burned with thirst. He carried a small flask at his side, but he had already emptied it long ago. All that remained was a memory of water, and the hope that somewhere ahead he might find relief. The man was not used to such harsh lands. He was young, curious about the world, and had decided to wander far from the towns he knew. He had heard stories of hidden tribes in the desert, groups of people who lived by their own traditions, away from the noise of the modern world. Most travelers dismissed these stories as legends, but he was different. He wanted to see for himself, to learn how people survived in such a place. Now, however, his adventurous spirit was fading, replaced by worry. His legs shook as he moved forward, and his eyes searched desperately for any sign of water or shelter. At first, it seemed hopeless. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, with no trees, no streams, not even a rock to lean on. But then in the distance, he noticed something unusual. At first, it looked like a trick of the heat, a shimmer that seemed to dance and disappear. But as he continued forward, he realized it was real. It was not an illusion. It was a cluster of palm trees standing proudly in the middle of the desert. The sight gave him strength. He quickened his pace, though his legs protested, and soon he reached the shade of the trees. There, hidden among the palms, was a well. It was made of stone, old but strong, and beside it was a wooden bucket tied to a rope. The traveler's heart filled with joy. His hands shook as he pulled up the bucket, and he leaned forward to drink. The water was cool and fresh, and he felt life return to his body. Every drop was precious, and for the first time in hours he could breathe without pain in his throat. He filled his flask, determined not to waste a single moment of this gift. As he stepped back from the well, wiping water from his chin, he heard a sound. It was soft at first, like the rustle of cloth in the wind. He turned and his eyes widened. A man was standing not far away, watching him quietly. He was older, with a tall frame and a strong presence. His face was lined with age and wisdom, and his dark eyes seemed to hold stories of generations. He wore traditional robes, long and flowing, decorated with patterns that spoke of heritage and respect. Around his head was a turban, neatly wrapped, protecting him from the sun. The traveler froze for a moment. He had not heard the man approach, and he wondered if he had done something wrong. But then he noticed the man's lips were dry, his skin slightly pale from the heat. The stranger had clearly been walking under the same merciless sun. Without thinking too long, the traveler reached for his flask. He walked forward and offered it with both hands. The older man looked at him, surprised. There was a pause, as though he were studying the young traveler's heart through his simple gesture. Then slowly he accepted the flask. He drank deeply, and a look of relief passed over his face. When he finished, he handed the flask back, nodding respectfully. The traveler smiled softly. "Water is for sharing," he said gently, his voice hoarse but kind. The man did not reply immediately. Instead, he placed a hand over his chest in a gesture of thanks. His eyes, deep and sharp, lingered on the traveler for a moment longer before he turned to look at the well. He seemed to say something under his breath in a language the traveler did not understand. Then, with a final nod, he began to walk away, his robes flowing behind him like the shadow of the desert itself. The traveler stood there, unsure what had just happened. He wondered if he had met one of the people from the old stories. The man's appearance, his clothing, and his dignified way of moving suggested he was no ordinary wanderer. Whoever he was, he carried himself with authority. When the older man disappeared into the distance, the traveler sat beneath the palm trees, resting. He thought about the strange encounter. Why had the man looked at him with such intensity? Why had his simple act of giving water seemed so important? The traveler did not know, but he felt he had just experienced something significant, something that might follow him long after he left this place. As the evening came, the desert began to cool. The traveler built a small fire from dry branches he had found under the palms. He ate the last of his bread and drank a little more water, careful not to waste what he had saved. The stars appeared in the sky, brighter than he had ever seen, and he lay back to rest. His thoughts kept returning to the man at the well. Far away, unseen by the traveler, the older man returned to his people. He was not just any man. He was the leader of the tribe that had lived in these deserts for centuries. He walked into the camp and his people greeted him with respect. They could see he was deep in thought and they waited for him to speak. When he finally told them of the traveler, his words carried weight. "A stranger offered me water when I was in need," he said. "This is no small thing. It is a sign of honor, of character, and of respect. Our ways teach us to remember such kindness. We must not forget it." The tribe listened closely, for their leader's words were always considered sacred. Some murmured in surprise. Outsiders rarely showed generosity. Most feared them or avoided them completely. This traveler, however, had acted without hesitation. The daughters of the leader, sitting quietly nearby, exchanged glances. They had heard their father's words and felt curiosity stir in their hearts. Who was this traveler? Why had he come? What sort of man would offer water so freely in the desert where every drop was precious? Questions began to grow in their minds, questions that would not easily fade. Meanwhile, the traveler slept peacefully beneath the stars, unaware of the thoughts his small act of kindness had awakened. For him, it was only a simple gesture, a human thing to do. But for the tribe, it was something greater, a symbol that could not be ignored. The desert, silent and endless, kept its secrets through the night. But by the time the sun rose again, the traveler's life would no longer belong only to himself. The morning light touched the desert with a golden glow, soft and gentle compared to the fire of the day before. The traveler woke under the palm trees, feeling a little stronger. He stretched his tired arms and drank a careful sip from his flask. The water refreshed him, but his thoughts quickly returned to the man he had met by the well. The man's face, his presence, and the way he had walked away without a single word still lingered in the traveler's mind. Who was he? Why had he looked so deeply into his eyes before leaving? The question circled his thoughts as he gathered his few belongings and prepared to continue his journey. What the traveler did not know was that the desert was not as empty as it seemed. High on a dune in the early light, figures watched him. They were men from the tribe, their robes blending into the colors of the sand. They had been sent by their leader, the same man who had drunk water from the traveler's flask the day before. Their eyes followed his every movement. They spoke softly to one another in their language, deciding whether to approach him or simply observe. For now they chose to stay hidden, but the traveler's every step was noted. As he walked away from the well, the traveler felt something unusual. It was not fear exactly, but a sense that he was not alone. Sometimes he thought he heard faint sounds, like the shuffle of footsteps or a breath of cloth moving with the wind. When he turned around, the desert stretched empty behind him, quiet and endless. Still, he could not shake the feeling that someone was nearby. His heart beat faster, though he tried to calm himself with reason. Perhaps it was only the wind or his tired imagination after such a hard day. Back in the tribe's camp, the leader sat with his elders. They were men of wisdom, men whose hair had turned white with age and whose words carried the strength of years. The leader told them about the stranger. He described how the traveler had given him water without hesitation, not knowing who he was. "In our desert," the leader said, "a man's true nature is revealed when he faces thirst." This one showed a heart of generosity. The elders listened carefully. One of them nodded and replied, "Our laws remind us that the desert gives nothing for free. To share water is to share life. If the stranger offered you life, then it must be honored." Another elder added, "The ancestors bless those who respect our ways. We must remember this kindness, for such actions are rare among outsiders." The leader agreed. His voice grew stronger as he said, "This man is different. I saw it in his eyes. He does not look at us with fear or judgment. He looked at me as a man, not as a stranger from a hidden tribe." His words carried across the tent, and even those outside paused to listen. Respect for the leader was deep, and his thoughts often became the thoughts of all. Not far from the gathering of elders, the leader's 2 daughters were sitting with the women of the tribe. They were young but graceful, admired by their people not only for their beauty but also for their wisdom and kindness. When they heard their father speak of the traveler, they leaned closer, their curiosity awakened. The elder daughter whispered to her sister, "Who is this man that father speaks of with such honor?" The younger one answered softly, "Perhaps he is meant to cross our path for a reason." Their eyes sparkled with interest, though they remained quiet in the presence of others. As the sun climbed higher, the traveler continued his walk. He had no map, only a general sense of direction, but his steps were guided by hope. The desert stretched before him, yet he noticed small signs of life. Bird tracks in the sand, the faint sound of goats in the distance, even smoke rising faintly beyond a far dune. These were clues that people lived nearby, though he was unsure whether to seek them out or avoid them. By midday, his energy began to fade. The heat pressed down like a heavy blanket, and he sought shelter behind a rocky outcrop. There he rested, eating a small piece of dried food he had saved. His eyes wandered across the horizon, and again he felt that strange sense of being watched. For a moment he thought he saw a figure move at the edge of the sandhills, but when he blinked it was gone. What he did not realize was that the tribe's scouts were still near. They moved like shadows, careful not to be seen. They reported back to their leader every few hours, describing the traveler's movements. Their respect grew quietly among themselves. "He does not complain to the sky," one scout whispered. "He walks with steady steps even in hardship." Another added, "He guards his water carefully but does not cling to it with greed." Perhaps the leader is right. He is not like the others. That night, while the traveler rested again under the stars, the tribe gathered around their fire. The leader told the story of the stranger once more, but this time with greater meaning. "It is said that honor arrives in the desert in unexpected ways," he told his people. "We cannot choose how kindness finds us, but we can choose how we respond." His words carried to every ear, and murmurs spread through the camp. Some people were surprised. Others nodded in agreement. A few, especially the younger warriors, wondered aloud what this would mean for their tribe. The daughters listened closely, their hearts stirred by the story. They had grown up hearing tales of bravery and tradition, but this was different. This was happening now before their own eyes. The elder daughter thought to herself, how rare it must be for a man to give water freely in such a land. The younger one thought, if father respects him so much, perhaps he is someone we must meet. Meanwhile, the traveler dreamed beneath the open sky. In his dream, he saw the well again, but this time the older man stood beside it with many people behind him. They were not silent watchers, but voices filled with song. The dream filled him with a strange peace, though he could not understand its meaning. When the dawn came again, the desert awoke with light and color. The traveler prepared to continue, unaware that his life was about to change forever. The tribe had already decided. The kindness shown to their leader would not be left unanswered. By the next sunrise, the quiet whispers within the tribe would become actions, and the traveler would find himself standing before a people he had only heard about in legends. He thought his journey was simply about survival, but the desert had chosen to write a far greater story for him. The sun rose again, painting the desert in shades of gold and fire. The traveler stirred from his sleep, brushing sand from his clothes as he sat up. His body ached from walking and sleeping on the hard ground, but his spirit was calm. He felt stronger than the first day, though he still carried little food and only a small amount of water. He thought to himself that he must keep moving, perhaps find a village, perhaps find people who could help. What he did not know was that the people he sought had already found him. As he gathered his things, he heard a faint sound carried by the wind. It was not the call of a bird or the whisper of shifting sand. It was heavier, more rhythmic. His ears strained, and then he understood. Hooves, horses. The sound grew louder, and when he looked toward the horizon, he saw them. A line of horsemen appeared on the top of a dune, their silhouettes framed against the bright morning sky. Their robes flowed with the wind, and the sun reflected off the metal of their spears. There were at least 10 of them, moving in perfect unity as they guided their horses down the slope. The traveler froze, his heart racing. He had heard stories of desert raiders, men who attacked the weak. He had no weapon, no strength to fight. For a moment he thought about running, but where could he go? The desert offered no hiding place. He stood still, waiting. The horsemen approached quickly, their pace strong but not threatening. When they reached him, they surrounded him in a half-circle. Their eyes, dark and sharp, studied him. The traveler could feel their strength, but he also saw discipline. They did not shout, did not raise their weapons. One of them, who seemed older, dismounted and stepped forward. He raised his hand in greeting, his voice deep but calm. "You are the one who gave water," the man said in broken words of the traveler's language. The traveler blinked in surprise. His fear softened, though his heart still pounded. He nodded slowly. "Yes," he replied. The horseman studied him for a long moment, then gestured toward his horse. "You come," he said firmly. The traveler hesitated. He looked around at the circle of riders. Their faces were serious but not cruel. He understood then that resistance was useless and perhaps unnecessary. Slowly he nodded again. The man helped him onto the horse, and soon they were riding together across the desert. The journey was unlike anything the traveler had ever experienced. The horses moved swiftly, their hooves striking the sand with confidence. The riders kept a steady pace, their robes flying like banners in the wind. The desert stretched endlessly, yet they seemed to know every direction, every hidden path. The traveler clung to the saddle, the hot air stinging his face, his thoughts racing. Where were they taking him? Hours passed, and finally, in the distance, he saw movement. At first it was faint, like heat shimmering, but then it grew clearer. Tents, dozens of them, a camp alive with people. He saw children running, women carrying baskets, men guiding goats and camels. Smoke rose from fires, and the air carried the scent of roasted food. The riders' camp was large, far larger than he expected, and filled with life. As they entered, the people stopped what they were doing to watch. Their eyes followed the stranger, whispering among themselves. The traveler felt the weight of their gaze, but he also noticed respect in the way the horsemen moved. They did not drag him in like a prisoner. They escorted him with dignity as though he was someone important. At the center of the camp stood a tall tent decorated with patterns and symbols. In front of it, the leader waited. The traveler recognized him immediately, the same man he had met at the well. His heart leapt. So it was true. The man he had given water to was not just a desert wanderer. He was the leader of this entire tribe. The horseman dismounted and guided the traveler forward. The leader stepped down from his seat and came closer. The people gathered silently, their eyes wide with curiosity. The leader raised his hand and the camp grew still. He looked at the traveler, his expression firm but warm. "This is the man," the leader said in his own language. Though the traveler could not understand the words, he felt the meaning in the leader's tone. The people nodded and murmured. The leader gestured toward him and continued. "He gave water when I was in need. He honored me without knowing who I was. For this, we honor him." The tribe erupted in cheers and chants. The traveler looked around in shock, his eyes wide. He had not expected this. To him, offering water had been a simple act of kindness. Yet here, in this place, it carried the weight of destiny. The leader beckoned him closer and placed a hand on his shoulder. Then he led him into the great tent. Inside, the air was cooler and carpets covered the floor. Cushions were laid out and food had been prepared. Dates, bread, roasted meat, and bowls of fresh water awaited. The traveler was seated in a place of honor, and the leader sat beside him. For the first time, the leader spoke directly in the traveler's language, though slowly. "You gave water. You gave life. My people do not forget." His eyes held deep respect. The traveler struggled to find words. "It was nothing," he said softly. "You were thirsty. Anyone would have done the same." The leader shook his head. "Not anyone. Many passed by without care. But you stopped, you gave. That is honor." Outside, the tribe began to celebrate. Music filled the air, drums, flutes, and voices chanting in rhythm. Dancers moved gracefully, their steps telling stories of the desert, of survival, of loyalty. Children laughed, running through the crowd, while the elders sat with quiet smiles, nodding at the unfolding scene. Then 2 figures entered the tent. The traveler looked up and saw them, the daughters of the leader. They moved with poise, their garments bright with colors of red and gold, their hair shining in the lamplight. Their faces carried both beauty and strength, and their eyes were filled with curiosity as they studied the stranger. The traveler felt his heart race again, but this time it was not from fear. It was from awe. He lowered his gaze respectfully, unsure how to act. The leader smiled at his daughters and then at the traveler. "You will see," the leader said gently. "This kindness is more than chance. It is the will of the desert." The traveler's mind spun. He had thought he was simply passing through, surviving one more day. Yet now he sat in the heart of a tribe, honored like a guest of great importance, with people celebrating outside and the leader's daughters standing before him. He did not yet understand what was to come, but he could feel it. The air itself seemed alive with promise, and he knew his life would never be the same again. The celebration in the camp grew louder as the night deepened. Drums beat in steady rhythm. Voices rose in chants that carried far into the desert. and flames from the great fire painted the faces of the people in warm light. The traveler sat in the leader's tent, still trying to understand the events unfolding around him. Hours earlier, he had been wandering alone, unsure if he would even survive another day. Now he was being honored by an entire tribe, given food, drink, and respect as though he were someone of great importance. The leader sat beside him, calm and dignified. His eyes glowed with quiet pride, but there was something deeper in his expression, something the traveler could not yet define. When the food had been shared and the music softened, the leader spoke again, slowly, in the traveler's language. "You gave water to me," he said. "You gave life. In our law, such kindness cannot be forgotten. Our ancestors teach us, the man who honors the leader is honored by the tribe." The traveler listened carefully, nodding as he tried to understand. He still felt uneasy. "I only did what was right," he said quietly. "You were thirsty. I could not refuse." The leader's face softened, but his voice grew stronger. "That is why it is important. Many would have turned away, but you gave, even though you had little yourself. That is the mark of a true man, and such a man cannot be sent away with only words of thanks." The traveler lowered his gaze, unsure how to reply. Gratitude was natural, but what more could he accept? He had not come to take anything from these people. He had only wanted to survive the desert. At that moment, the daughters of the leader entered the tent again. Their presence silenced the air. They moved with grace, their colorful garments flowing like the desert wind. Their eyes, bright with intelligence and curiosity, fixed on the traveler. He felt his chest tighten not out of fear, but from the weight of the moment. The leader rose to his feet. His tall figure commanded the tent, and when he spoke, his words were firm and clear. "Our ways are not like the ways of the outside world. In our tribe, honor is answered with honor. You have given me life. I will give you more than thanks. I will give you family blood and place among us." He turned to his daughters, then back to the traveler. "These are my daughters. I offer them to you, not as strangers, but as companions, as wives, as women who will share your path." The traveler's breath caught. His mind raced in shock. He looked at the daughters, their calm faces shining in the lamplight. He looked at the leader, whose eyes held no doubt. Then he looked down at his own hands, rough and weary from the journey. Could this truly be happening? Silence filled the tent for a moment. The traveler felt the weight of every eye, the weight of the tribe's tradition pressing on him. He swallowed hard and spoke with honesty. "I do not know if I am worthy," he said softly. "I am only a wanderer. I have nothing. No wealth, no home. How can I accept such a gift?" The leader's voice thundered like the desert wind. "Worth is not measured in gold or land. It is measured in heart. You showed your worth when you gave water freely. That is wealth greater than coins. That is strength greater than swords." The traveler lifted his eyes slowly. The leader's words touched something deep within him. Still doubt lingered. Would it be right to accept? Would it be fair to the daughters? He looked at them, expecting hesitation, but instead he saw calm and quiet acceptance. The elder daughter stepped forward slightly, her voice steady. "You showed kindness without knowing who our father was," she said. "Such kindness is rare. We do not see weakness in you. We see honor." The younger daughter added, her tone gentle but firm, "Our people believe that destiny moves in ways we cannot always understand. Perhaps it is destiny that brought you to the well. Perhaps it is destiny that brings you here now." The traveler's heart pounded. Their words eased his doubt, but he still felt overwhelmed. The camp outside began to chant again, voices rising with rhythm as though the people already knew what would happen. The drums beat louder, the fire crackled higher, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation. The leader raised his arms, and the camp fell silent. "This is our way," he said to his people. "To give water is to give life. To receive life is to bind lives together. Tonight we celebrate not only the man's kindness, but his joining with us. He will no longer walk as a stranger. He will walk as one of us." The people cheered, their voices echoing through the desert. The traveler sat frozen, caught between disbelief and wonder. He thought of his lonely journey, his thirst, the hopelessness he had felt in the desert. Now all of it seemed like a path leading here, to this fire, to this tribe, to this moment. The leader turned back to him, his gaze steady. "Do you accept?" he asked simply. The traveler hesitated, his mind swirling with thoughts. Part of him still felt unworthy, still uncertain if he could truly belong here. But another part, a deeper part, felt a pull he could not deny. The kindness he had given had returned to him multiplied, not in coins or goods, but in trust, in honor, in family. Slowly, with a breath that seemed to carry all the weight of his journey, he nodded. "I accept," he said softly, yet his words carried with them the strength of his heart. The tent erupted with cheers. Outside, the music began again, louder and brighter than before. The drums beat in wild joy. Flutes sang high notes and dancers leapt with energy. The fire roared and the night became a festival. Food was shared freely. Laughter filled the air and songs of old were sung to bless the new bond. The traveler was guided outside, where the people surrounded him with smiles and chants. The daughters stood beside him, their faces calm and radiant. The leader placed his hands on their shoulders, then on the travelers. "Tonight," he declared, "we unite not only families, but worlds. May the desert bless this bond." The people raised their voices in agreement. The traveler felt overwhelmed, but in his heart he felt a warmth he had never known. It was not only the fire, not only the drums or the chants. It was the realization that a simple act of kindness had opened a door to an entirely new life. The celebration lasted long into the night. The traveler sat among the people, no longer a stranger but part of something greater. He looked at the stars above, brighter than he had ever seen them, and felt a deep peace. The desert that had once seemed so empty now felt alive, filled with voices, filled with belonging. And as the night drew on, he understood that his journey was no longer just about survival. It had become something far greater, a journey into destiny, honor, and family. The dawn after the great celebration came softly, carrying with it the cool breath of the desert before the sun grew fierce again. The camp was quiet, resting after a night of endless music and joy. Only a few early risers moved among the tents, tending to animals or preparing small fires for morning meals. The traveler sat outside the leader's tent, watching the horizon slowly change color. He could hardly believe what had happened. In only 2 days, his life had shifted from a lonely walk through burning sands to sitting in the heart of a tribe that had welcomed him as their own. He remembered the first moment he had seen the leader at the well, weak and thirsty, and how natural it had felt to offer his water. That small act, which he had thought was simple and unremarkable, had opened a door to something far greater than he could have imagined. Now the tribe called him brother. The people looked at him with respect, and the leader had given him a place beside his daughters. His heart felt both heavy and light, filled with wonder, gratitude, and the weight of responsibility. The leader joined him soon, his tall frame casting a shadow against the rising sun. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried pride. He sat beside the traveler without speaking at first, letting the silence stretch comfortably between them. Finally he spoke. "The desert tests every man," he said slowly. "It shows the truth of his heart. You have been tested and you gave freely. That is why you are here now." The traveler nodded, still humbled. "I do not know if I deserve such honor," he admitted softly. "I am not from your people. I do not know your ways." The leader placed a hand firmly on his shoulder. "You will learn. A man does not become family by blood alone. He becomes family through choice, through respect, and through shared life. You have already taken the first step." As the camp woke, more people gathered around. Women carried baskets of bread and dates. Children ran playfully between the tents, and men prepared their horses for the day. The traveler watched with quiet fascination. Everything in the tribe moved with purpose and unity. Each person had a role, and together they formed something strong, something unbroken. By midday, a great feast was prepared again, this time not with the wild energy of the previous night, but with calm joy. The traveler was invited to sit at the leader's side, and once more the daughters were present. They spoke gently with him, asking about his life beyond the desert, about the lands he had seen and the people he had met. He answered honestly, describing his simple beginnings, his love for journeys, and his desire to understand the world. They listened with keen interest, sometimes laughing softly, sometimes growing serious at his tales of hardship. The more they spoke, the more the traveler felt a connection forming, not forced, but natural. The daughters were not only graceful but wise. They carried the strength of their people in their words, and yet they welcomed his stories with open hearts. It struck him then that this union was not about wealth or exchange, but about trust and respect. He had been given the chance not just to marry into the leader's family, but to build something lasting with people who had accepted him fully. That evening, another ceremony took place. The leader gathered the tribe together around the great fire once more. His voice carried across the night air, strong and steady. "This man came to us as a stranger," he declared, "but he showed the heart of a true brother. He will no longer walk alone. He will walk with us, and we with him. From this day, he is one of us." The people cheered, their voices rising in unity. They raised their hands toward the sky, chanting blessings. The daughters stood beside the traveler, their calm faces glowing in the firelight. The leader placed his hands over theirs, sealing the bond before the tribe. The traveler felt his chest tighten with emotion. He was no longer an outsider. He was no longer just a wanderer in search of survival. He had been given a family, a home, and a future. He bowed his head deeply in respect, and when he lifted his eyes again, he saw the smiles of the people around him. The night became another celebration, though this time filled more with warmth than wildness. Songs were sung not of battle or hardship, but of unity, of new beginnings, of hope carried into the future. The traveler joined in where he could, clapping his hands with the rhythm of the drums, his laughter mixing with the voices of the tribe. As the days passed, he began to learn more of their ways. He learned how to ride their horses with skill across the dunes, how to track the movement of animals in the sand, and how to respect the land that gave them life. He learned their language slowly, first through gestures and simple words, then through conversations with the children who delighted in teaching him. Each lesson was a step deeper into belonging. The daughters guided him too. They taught him the meanings behind the songs, the reasons for the dances, the wisdom of their ancestors passed through generations. Their kindness eased his doubts and their strength inspired him. With every passing day, the bond between them grew stronger. What had begun as a surprise offer now blossomed into genuine connection, built not on chance alone but on shared respect and care. One evening, as he stood watching the sunset paint the desert in orange and purple, the leader came to him once more. His voice was soft but filled with meaning. "You see, my son, the desert is never empty. It holds many paths, though we cannot always see them. The well where we met was not chance. It was the meeting of two paths meant to join. You gave me water, and in return I gave you family. This is balance. This is life." The traveler's eyes grew moist as he listened. He had once thought of himself as small, as just another man wandering the earth. But now he understood that even small acts could carry great weight, and that sometimes destiny revealed itself in the simplest moments. He thought back to the first drop of water he had offered, the look in the leader's eyes and the silence that had passed between them. That moment had been the beginning of everything. A simple gesture of kindness had transformed his life, binding him to a people, giving him love, and giving him purpose. As night fell again, the camp lit with fires and the stars stretched endlessly above. The traveler felt peace settle deeply within him. He was no longer afraid of the unknown. He no longer doubted his place in the world. He had learned that life could change in the blink of an eye, that honor was found not in riches but in kindness, and that family could be formed by the heart as much as by blood. From that day onward, he no longer thought of himself as a lonely wanderer. He was a son, a husband, and a brother of the tribe. He carried with him the lesson of the desert, that even the smallest act of compassion could grow into a story that would be told for generations. And as he lay down to sleep beneath the stars, with the sounds of laughter and song filling the night, he knew that his journey was no longer about searching for a place to belong. He had already found it.